Hello, and welcome to another episode of the LendAPI Partner Podcast. Today, my guest is Georgina Merhom, who is founder and CEO of Solo. Welcome to the podcast, Georgina.
Thank you.
Now, tell me, Georgina, how did your business get started?
So, Solo started from a personal pain point that I experienced being a lender in my past company. Solo is the second company that I founded. My first company was a lending company in Egypt that serviced small businesses and freelancers. And I really got to see up close the chaos around customer data collection, especially when open banking and credit coverage was not optimal. And so sold that company to a bank and founded Solo to solve that problem for banks, lenders, and fintechs.
Okay, so you're a chain entrepreneur using the pain point from one business to start another one. That always is a good starting point because you know exactly what the problem is that you're solving for. Now, what is the number one use case that you solve for at Solo?
So our largest use case today is lending, both on the origination and the underwriting side. We help make the process much more efficient, but also we make the customer data reusable across multiple products, multiple departments, and more recently across institutions. So we are trying to eliminate the redundancy and reset associated with customer data collection that's costing the industry today about $30 billion in manual data collection spend and a lot of unnecessary time, cost, and reintroduction on the customer side.
Focus currently on lending. How does that work in practice? So how does a lender use your solution?
So a lender will integrate us at their point of ingestion. Some lenders are very traditional and get applications sent to a sales inbox. Some lenders have an online form. We will typically integrate where they interface with the customer. And then across all their other systems. And then essentially what we will do is based on the workflow and the requirements of a workflow. So that will typically depend on the financial product, whether that's a mortgage, a small business loan, a credit card. We will integrate the requirements of their either SOP or workflow, and then we will resolve gaps with the data that they have, both within their existing systems, within their point of ingestion. So if information is coming through email and very scattered and, unstructured format across their LOS, their core. And then we will resolve gaps both with the customer, but also with third party orchestrators. So if a customer is coming in for a mortgage and we already have some information on the customer in the core or in the LOS, we won't be starting from scratch with that customer. We'll just look at the mortgage SOP requirements, look at the data we already have, and be resolving information with the customer. It's typically a nonlinear process. And so if you think of customer data collection up until this point, we've kind of graduated from paperwork to online forms. But what we failed to account for has been the fact that the form doesn't talk back to you. So it's a one-way resolution versus with Solo, based on the answers that we get, based on the SOP, based on information we find, we are back and forth resolving information with the customer and then making sure that once we collect that information, it becomes reusable so that in 3 weeks' time, if they come into the bank for a different product, we're not starting from scratch with them. And more importantly, if they go to another financial service provider, as long as it's within the network, they're also not starting from scratch with
Wow.
that new provider.
Okay, that is very powerful. But even within the same company, I remember when I was applying for a home equity line of credit, I was redoing my condo. I applied for a home equity line of credit with the same bank that also has my mortgage, and then they literally asked me, "Hey, can you upload your mortgage documentation?" I was kind of like, "That's kind of weird because you have my mortgage." They didn't sell it; they actually had it. They portfolioed it, so they actually had the information. But that is a really weird customer experience, right? Where you go like, hey, you're my bank. You should have that information. Why do I need to upload it? Does Solo solve for that?
Exactly. So Solo is the single source of truth that activates all your other systems. We collect data in a way that can be reused, whether that be within the same institution to activate other systems, to be cross department, but also across institutions. So not just within each institution on its own. The core pain points that banks and lenders have today is that the way that they collect, store, and activate the data is just not reusable. That's why they have to reset every customer interaction from zero.
But from a consumer perspective, and that just feels weird, right? It feels like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, you should have that information. What did you do with it? Did you lose it? It raises all sorts of other questions, and let alone the fact that I now need to go search that information, right? It's how it also really creates friction in the process. I imagine that with Solo, the whole process becomes much less frictionful.
Yeah, I'll reference my friend Tim from Choice Bank. Actually, he
Mm.
described this in a better way than I could. He says, it's like when you're on the phone with Amazon support and you explain your entire life story, and then they can't service you, and so they have to connect you to a different department, and they connect you to a different department, and you have to explain your life story all over again, and there's no continuity. Everything initiates a reset, and so when he explains it that way, I think people resonate with it on a personal level.
Yeah, totally. I think we've all been through one or more of those experiences where you go like, huh, same company, left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. Now, what is your favorite customer story?
So I think the favorite thing that's ever been said to me by a customer was and I think he was quoting a Kanye West song. I'm not too sure, but he said, with Solo, hard takes a day and impossible takes a week. And I think that just goes to show how closely we work with all of our partners, banks, lenders, loan service providers. I think my favorite experiences as a founder has been unlocking new things that the product can do or can solve for, or new use cases with our existing customers. And I love when they come to me with ideas on, I think if it can do this, we could try doing this. A lot of our banks, lenders, and even just investors who happen to also be banks have been a big part of how we've built our roadmap. When I started the company, I had a very specific roadmap that I thought we were going to achieve. And there's been so many people that have influenced that along the way. And actually, the network that we just launched last month was a perfect example of that. It was a couple of lenders on our platform that all actually knew each other and came through word of mouth, and they realized there was a lot of redundancy in what they were each doing with their customers. And we had realized that we solved the redundancy within one institution, but we had a bunch of partners that actually worked together. They were either referral partners of each other, or they would do turn downs. So if one lender said no, they would refer it to a different lender. And they realized there was so much duplicative cost in both their data vendors, but also in just what they were asking customers. And I remember, one of the CEOs had come to me with a crazy third party data source bill. I won't name who, but he was like, how is it that we're paying all of this when most of our deal flow comes from X bank that's also on Solo? Can we not just port that data over, or at least, have the stamp of approval knowing that someone else did this verification? And so my favorite stories always come from whiteboard conversations with their customers that always have come to me with brilliant ideas and are collaborative even across each other. And that's really how the network was born. Collaboration between our existing customers and partners. And I think Solo has been really influenced and shaped by the network before it even existed.
That sounds really powerful, and especially when your customers come back to you and say, "Hey, can it do this? Can it do that?" That really means that they're invested in it and they see the opportunity for what you're providing. That is very powerful. Well, that's probably also a good point to wrap this up on. Thank you very much, Georgina, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And until a next episode of the Lend API Partner Podcast.